How's it going, everybody? So I was sent a video to respond to, and this is kind of exciting because it's been a while since I've had something that I thought would be actually interesting to talk about when it comes to liberty. So the channel here is called Turd Flinging Monkey, and the video title is the Anarchist Challenge. The core of the video is that the author presents a comparison of the concept of voluntary, I guess you could say, action, and he makes kind of volunteeria example of maybe a country, a pseudo-country, just for comparison purposes, and compares that to totalitarian, basically just creating some sort of ideological framework for which to think about how do you compare geopolitical issues with theoretical situations. You having what appears to me to be, based on his video, a contemporary rendition of thinking that is, how are things currently going on around the world, and what would happen exactly if one nation state, some geopolitical area, suddenly became truly, as you could say, voluntaristic or ANCAP. And for me, I think that part of maybe the flaw in presenting it this way is I don't really personally see that as the way that things transition between, I guess you could say, a type of tyranny and liberty. I personally advocate for the concept of the not-for-profit government model leading to liberty. And that not-for-profit government model means that you take the government that currently exists, you end taxation at a core, and you turn all funding and resources into a type of public trust that changes the model of government from forced participation to a type of voluntary participation, whereby the government now must act like a not-for-profit. They have to fundraise and get support by advocating for, that is those who are working for the government, for its causes. And so this is a type of transition. It's obviously not causing to be remedied all the past harms. The idea is okay, what are the first steps toward taking a true nation state and moving it into a more liberty-friendly sphere, moving toward anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism. And I think that that is really key if you're going to put the framework in a, oh, well, what do you do with the current geopolitics, as opposed to what I think most ANCAPs advocate for at a foundation, and that is philosophical change. I don't personally, and I think from what I've seen from most other people who are, true adherents of the non-aggression principle, I don't think that any of them think that, oh, magically, if you just end governments around the world, everything's suddenly going to be peaceful or all right. Obviously not. And the reason why is because everyone around the world, by and large, has been indoctrinated into a statist mentality through government education, the Prussian model. And so you're not going to get that type of peace and voluntary interaction when so many people have been deluded into thinking that they need the state, deluded into thinking that they need to enact violence against others to reach solutions, and to short-term oriented thinking. So voluntarism is a philosophical concept at its core, and that transition from tyranny to liberty comes through the changing of minds first, because you can't just change the structure. Otherwise, everything does go into a form of chaos, because suddenly, if you have that structure taken away, you have a bunch of people who are dependent on that structure, who are living based on that structure. And I think that that would lead to a lot of potential violence, especially if it happens with some countries, and then others are still tyrannical, and then they try to invade, and you get that type of mass harm. But that doesn't mean that that is, therefore justifying the nature of government. It just means that, okay, what is the reasonable, logical way to progress toward that, to evolve? And as I've often said in my videos, we live in a world with space age technology and Stone Age philosophy. And so to change the minds of people around the world, that requires taking away the government's power, enabling people to have voluntary cooperation in the markets to compete with all government services. And we've seen this happen across the world. Not everybody, not every government has every single thing monopolized. And you can look at different areas, like in China, where they have their post service not monopolized like the US government, and nobody uses it because the private markets there produce a much better outcome. And I think you'll see that across all systems, including justice and including in national security. So then the question is, okay, so you have this kind of not-for-profit model of government that's transitioning. Okay, well, how does that get funded? Well, are you going to have a free rider problem? What's going to happen as far as, nuclear weapons and all this other stuff? And I think that you have the same thing you have now. You have these organizations that still have these types of delegated powers as far as national security is concerned. They have the ability, obviously, to control and manage those weapons, but now there is a new level of public scrutiny. And actually tying in with that, another part of my not-for-profit government model comes with the exposure of all government secrets. The government can no longer have secrets. And so as knowledge starts to emerge and people are now much more aware, not perfectly, because it's very hard for one person to know all things, but through the channels of interactions and other people and things being brought to light, as is often done with any type of major development in human history, is people who are information gatherers, news media outlets, major organizations, public influencers. They find important information, they bring it out to the public, to those who have the channels to disseminate that to the public at large. And so as that starts to happen, I think then you start to see, okay, here are the actual threats that are happening, because now all the threats around the world and reports, stuff like that, are no longer kept in the wraps. No one's, being kept in the dark about the potential harms and the secret plots and things like that. And also you have the opportunity for people to compete in the private market with intelligence, especially as to, saying what's happening, gathering information, respecting, other property rights otherwise. But you have that type of competition in providing security. And there are actually major incentives for people to participate in this. From a business perspective, obviously, major businesses have an interest in not having their businesses blown up suddenly, or carriers have an interest in not having their planes blow up. This is really not a big secret that there are economic interests that are very much vested in security and national security, because nobody wants their business disrupted by missiles or terrorist attacks or gas attacks or anything like biological agents. Nobody wants their business to be destroyed. So there is an incentive. And that incentive can actually show itself in two ways, I think two major ways. One is the actual private businesses that they themselves provide security in a business interest in stopping any types of attacks, sharing information, and that already happens. This is not really strange. It's as small as shoplifting among stores. Stores share information, malls share information, even with the smallest things with security cameras about people that are stealing things and so on and so forth, or vandalizing. This is very basic microeconomic stuff. When we talk about the bigger scale, I mean, you see that even among big financial institutions, where they themselves are looking into types of terrorism, and it can include financial terrorism, because they don't want their businesses operations being stalled or harmed. Now, on the personal level, okay, outside of the businesses trying to protect themselves, what about people? People also have an interest in not being shot up, blown up, attacked, and so on and so forth. So there is actually an incentive for people to either act individually by offering their services, or to pay different organizations, possibly through insurance or other types of security agencies, to have national defense, as well as through the government, because, again, now the government is actually forced to, that is, if it wants to have support, forced to report honestly and openly about the types of threats that are happening. And I don't really see that as being strange or a problem compared to everything that already exists with voluntary donations. People are already incentivized, even with taxation, to donate to causes. People happily give to firefighters holding out buckets. They happily give to police officers holding out buckets. They will pay, ADT or other security services or private security services to provide them the extra protection they want. And that's already with police and everything else going on. This is not new. This is not unusual. If you look at current market economics, those extra security measures are already market incentives. It's just that now, okay, instead of just maybe the rich or business owners, or maybe some middle class people, upper, middle class people, or those even in the poor, even those who are poor, you live in an apartment building, very often they have security. They have forms of measures of locks and checking things and so on and so forth. Security is something that is built in for business protection and individual protection, and there is a vested interest on both a small personal individual level, like, hey, the government put out this report about how they stop these attacks. Here's the information. I think they deserve my money. Or, hey, I work at this business and they provide security for these things, and they got information through whatever channels that they may have in contact with, that there could be this attack or so on and so forth. There is an incentive to share information about possible harms, an incentive for people to both physically, that is with their time, and monetarily with their resource, to contribute toward those things. And there is some comparison here, private military costs. I mean, it doesn't really mean much because, again, private military costs are built in the current economic system on top of the taxation system and all regulations and so on and so forth. So all those prices that you're seeing, again, they're already there with a bunch of monetary, I could say, regulatory push-up on it. So things are going to change as of course, markets proceed to do their thing and prices and competition start to lead toward things becoming more effective and efficient. And now, will there be free riders in that traditional economic sense? Of course, there's always going to be free riders with anything with security, because naturally people are not always going to be able to capture every single thing that they possibly could. Does it mean it's not going to get provided because of that? No, because at a core level, there are going to be those who have a lot, and the people who do have a lot do have a big incentive to protect their assets. And that's actually, as I've noted in my articles as well, something that already exists. People are like, oh, well, does that just mean that like the rich are gonna, buy off the justice systems and have control of the military? No, not really. If you look at the economics of things, again, even the richest person in the whole of America could barely afford to have a couple of twin towers that are currently built in New York City if you consider the billions of dollars of cost in those twin towers. And you think about the size of that scale, and you suddenly realize, whoa, like that much wealth still buys that much small space across a huge map. There is so much wealth dispersion, and the reason that people don't recognize it is because of all the ties that we have with government. The government's intermeddling with people's wealth creation, wealth growth, wealth sharing, and their ability to enact their economic power, and that's even at a fundamental level, property taxes, so on and so forth. So I think that when you look at this whole picture, and you look, again, at all the economic systems, and even at the current status with the rich and the elite, and they're paying to the system, you're going to find that it kind of already works that way. Again, if you look at those who are paying most of the taxes, well, it's already under our economic system, mostly the elite and the rich. Most of the taxes that are being paid in the system are being already paid by those big corporations and the very rich people. Like most of the money that the government's absorbing is coming from those people as a net. So it's not weird to think that, yes, it's possible that those who have a lot to lose have a lot to protect, and they want to protect that stuff, even if it means that other people surrounding their areas happen to get the benefits. It's not really that strange. It already exists. Now, the difference is now we have a power system and structure where, since those who are, influential are having to go through the government to get their power, they're using lobbyists, they're using, things like that in order to enact their policies and their wishes. But again, that is a matter of that power seat. You take away that power seat, you take away their ability to use the redistribution system to steal from one person and give it to another, or to gain a benefit through threats of force. Again, the clarity that comes through shared knowledge and openness needs to come through the not-for-profit type of government model, where all things are exposed. There is no more darkness. There is only the light of opening up everything so people can make as a most informed decision as possible. Again, not everybody's going to be able to read everything, but through aggregate knowledge, as we've seen with everything on the internet. I mean, if anything, the internet's just proven time and time again how open knowledge helps everybody become more informed about what is going on in the world. And really, you can watch and see anything you want happening across the world almost like that these days. Even in places like the Middle East, you can watch videos that were just uploaded and see what's happening with life over there. It's wild, but that type of knowledge sharing is the power behind the not-for-profit government model. That is the transition. So again, this comparison, I think, is weak. I think it's not realistic in terms of thinking about how would a not-for-profit government model be implemented, really. Voluntaria, as this is kind of written, is this. It's just this idea of like plopping down a new ANCAP society, no government, and everything else going on. That's not a realistic transition from what is currently to what could be. The ideological changes that have to happen, the economic changes that have to happen. And so that's my simple response, is that the comparison that Turd Flinging Monkey is making is not really, I think, the most well advocated model for anarcho-capitalism or liberty. It's just not realistic. It's almost like something you'd expect out of like a high school econ book, you know, with 50-year-old charts and 50-year-old understandings of economics. And I'm not saying that as a dig against this person. I'm just trying to say that the characterization as built is flimsy, and it's incomplete, and it doesn't actually represent what really could be the most effective model to transition with, again, with the current geopolitical climate considered. And so I think that if you take the not-for-profit government model as I've kind of articulated it, and if you want, you can read it at the link below, and you use that as a means to a transition period, you will have found the opportunity to still have that stability of what the government services were providing, including national defense, while the market is given a chance to catch up, and also people's philosophical evolution is allowed to again grow where it was otherwise stunted, thanks to the forcible education system as instituted by the United States government, of course, to indoctrinate people and to make them think that, you know, government is savior, the end-all be-all is its model, and you know, that's it, you can't exist without us. So I hope that really clarifies kind of the points here and the issues at hand, and I hope that gives people a pause for thought of thinking, okay, what is a realistic next step? To me, the realistic next step is to move toward the not-for-profit government model as a means, among many others, again, toward moving toward true voluntarism, true anarcho-capitalism, but at a foundation without the philosophy, yes, you're gonna have nasty chaos, because you have a whole set of generations of people who are brought up and indoctrinated in a world thinking that the only way to resolve conflict and the only way to have peace is through violence, which is the state. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll talk to you later.